Your vision starts to tunnel. The edges of the world go soft and grey, like someone is dimming a light you didn't know was on. Your hands don't feel like yours anymore. You tell your legs to move. They don't listen right away. Something in your chest is working too hard, gasping at air that barely exists up here. You are above 8,000 meters, the place climbers call the death zone, and your body is running out of a very simple, very essential thing: oxygen. You're a climber high on the upper slopes of Everest, past the last camp, above the point where rescue becomes almost impossible. The air pressure here is roughly a third of what it is at sea level. Every breath you take pulls in only a fraction of the oxygen your body is used to. You've trained for this, acclimatized for weeks. But no amount of preparation changes the basic physics of thin air. 1 minute in at this altitude without supplemental oxygen, and your blood is already struggling. Hemoglobin, the molecule that carries oxygen through your bloodstream, still binds oxygen the same way it always has. There's just far less of it available to bind to. Your heart responds the only way it knows how. It beats faster, trying to push more blood more often to compensate for what each load is missing. 5 minutes in and your breathing rate has climbed sharply. You're pulling in twice, sometimes 3 times, your normal number of breaths per minute. This is your body's blunt instinct kicking in, a reflex driven by chemoreceptors in your carotid arteries that sense falling oxygen and falling pH, and scream at your brainstem to breathe harder. It helps, but not enough. 30 minutes in, and your brain is starting to feel it directly. The brain uses a disproportionate share of your body's oxygen, and it has almost no reserve of its own. Neurons here can't survive long on empty. Researchers studying high-altitude physiology, including work following expeditions on Everest and Denali, have documented what happens next in real climbers. Judgment softens first, simple math becomes hard, you might misjudge a step, misread a rope, misplace your own hand on the ice. 1 hour in, and your body starts making trade-offs it wouldn't make anywhere else. Blood flow shifts away from your extremities and toward your core and brain. Your fingers and toes go colder, not just from the temperature outside, but because your circulatory system is quietly deciding what matters more right now. Frostbite risk climbs even as your brain fights to stay online. 3 hours in, and hypoxia deepens further. Oxygen saturation in your blood, which sits near 98% at sea level, may have dropped into the 60s or even lower up here. At that level, cells throughout your body switch to anaerobic metabolism, producing energy without oxygen. It works briefly, but it also produces lactic acid, and it can't sustain you for long. Your muscles, already burning through limited fuel, start failing faster than they should. 6 hours in a stall at this altitude and the danger compounds. This is where climbers describe something strange, a kind of dreamlike detachment. Some report hallucinations, a presence beside them that isn't there. Researchers who study altitude physiology, including physician Peter Hackett, who has spent decades studying high-altitude illness on Denali and in the Himalayas, have linked this to the brain's swelling response to low oxygen, a condition called high-altitude cerebral edema. Fluid builds where it shouldn't. Pressure inside the skull rises, coordination and reasoning both start to fail together. By this point, your body is sending signals that are impossible to ignore, even if your mind can barely process them. A pounding headache that doesn't respond to anything. Nausea, a staggering drunken walk even though you haven't touched a drop of alcohol. This symptom has a name among climbers and doctors alike. Ataxia. It's one of the clearest warning signs that the brain itself is beginning to swell under the strain of chronic oxygen deprivation. 8 hours in without descent and the numbers turn grim. Historical data from Everest expeditions shows that prolonged exposure above 8,000 meters without supplemental oxygen or a rapid retreat carries a steep mortality risk. The death zone earned its name honestly. Human physiology simply was not built to sustain itself here for long. Every organ system is quietly running a deficit it cannot repay. Some climbers in this exact situation turn back in time. Their training kicks in before their judgment fully collapses, and they descend just far enough for their blood oxygen to recover, sometimes within minutes of dropping only a few hundred meters. Altitude is unforgiving that way. A small change in elevation can mean the difference between a returning climber and a fatal outcome. Others aren't as fortunate. Documented cases from Everest's history describe climbers who pushed on past the point their bodies could recover from, collapsing within sight of the summit, their oxygen-starved brains no longer able to send the signal to stop. What this reveals goes far beyond one mountain. Your body, right now at whatever altitude you're reading or listening to this, depends on a supply chain of oxygen so precise that losing even a third of it can start unraveling your mind before your muscles. It's a reminder of how narrow the window really is between a functioning brain and one that's quietly starving. Altitude sickness isn't just an inconvenience for climbers, it's a stark, accelerated demonstration of what your body does the moment its oxygen margin disappears. Somewhere above 8,000 meters, a climber's vision is tunneling right now, the world going soft and grey at the edges. And somewhere far below, your own brain is doing the quiet, invisible work of keeping that same darkness away, one ordinary breath at a time.